Welcome to MTN Outdoors.
Welcome everybody to the very first episode of MTN Outdoors. I'm Andy Curtis and I'll be acting sort of as your tour guide as we take a look at everything that makes the great outdoors here in Montana so great. From stories about camping, hunting, fishing, conservation, gardening, even biology and the science behind our weather. If it happens outside here in the Treasure State, we'll cover it right here every week. And what better place to start than taking a look at some Montana icons on the land, in the water, in one destination that draws people here from all over the world that winds high above both.
It seems strange to say as I'm surrounded by feet and feet of snow, but this is one of the surest signs that summer is just around the corner. The Montana Department of Transportation working hard to plow the Beartooth Highway, which will be ready for its customary Memorial Day weekend opening. Is this a day you look forward to every year?
Every year, Casey. I love it.
Thursday's Beartooth Pass media tour wasn't just for us. MACK Long, the MDT director, never misses it.
Our guys have worked hard all year round taking care of Montana roads, but this is a special road.
It's one of the two most sought after drives in Montana, along with the Going to the Sun Road in Glacier National Park. Hundreds of thousands of tourists drive the pass every year, and almost all of them drive through and spend money in Red Lodge.
A lot of our business comes from people that are going up the highway. A lot of times they'll just go up and come back, have dinner, do a little shopping. It means a lot.
Even more visitors will make the trek up the highway this year for the 150th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park. Crews have been working on the road for a couple of weeks and are actually ahead of schedule, thanks mostly to a small snowpack.
We were down around 72%. The last two storms have us up almost at 90%.
Work also goes much faster these days thanks to this Snowcat, a trick MDT borrowed from Idaho. It levels the pack so this machine can eat it up and spit it out. MDT will actually be done plowing their side long before the May 27th deadline, but the Wyoming side of the pass, plowed by the National Park Service, always takes it right up to the edge, so don't get your hopes up thinking it'll open early. When it does, however, everyone is expecting another big summer.
We were busy even during COVID, but we expect a barn burner year this year.
On the Beartooth Pass, Casey Conley, MTN News.
It's been about 6 months since the Chippewa Cree released buffalo onto their land for the first time in over decades. Now the herd is expanded just in time for Mother's Day.
October of last year saw the first buffalo on Chippewa Cree land for the first time in decades. The last few weeks have seen a few additions to the herd just in time for Mother's Day.
So far we've had 3 baby calves born. We've added a couple more bulls since then.
The Buffalo Project started as an idea years ago and came to fruition when the first 11 buffalo were released last year.
Our first calf was born on April 23rd. When I heard about this, it made me feel really happy and overjoyed because it's the first buffalo, the calf to hit the ground, for our tribe. So to me, it felt like new beginnings.
They say the herd has adapted well to their new habitat and wanted to grow even bigger. They're planning on several more calves being born this year and are planning to continue to work with the American Prairie Reserve.
There's endless possibilities that we could go with it. Possibilities are endless. It's whatever our imaginations could do. We've seen what working together with other people, other tribes, other organizations can do. This was just a thought 2 years ago and now it's here. So, we could continue to have these good thoughts and grow.
The tribe's plan for the herd moving forward is to continue growing it as much as possible with continued buffalo donations. Inbox Elder, Asher Line, MTN News.
I'm LAYMAN. This is the Jefferson River. There are fish in the Jefferson River, and the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks are responsible for every one of them. But to find out how that population is doing, there's only a couple of ways they can do that. They can go in,
or like they're doing over on the Yellowstone River, use technology to study the fish. It's called pit tagging.
It's basically a microchip that just sits right underneath the skin of the fish, and then we can come back and we can scan that fish and it creates a unique identifying number.
A better way to think of it is like microchipping, activity that you would do to make sure you never lose your pet. These are not pets, however. This is Montana's wildlife. Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks realizes some of these fish could be caught. No worries, according to Jacobsen, you probably wouldn't even know you had caught a pit-tagged fish.
It's all just right under the skin, and you know, again, it's not noticeable at all, and it doesn't pose any threat to anyone who wants to harvest and eat fish. It's not in the meat of the fish or anything like that. It's just right under the dorsal fin.
As with many programs through the Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, this one is a partnership as well. This time, partnering with Montana State University to build a better picture of what the fish population in the Yellowstone is actually like.
And so the idea is, over time, as you deploy more of these pit tags, and you continue to recapture fish over time, you get a better sense of again, what that population size is, movement throughout the river, things like that.
This effort is also not a one and done effort. It happened last year, is continuing this year, and they're hoping a study will be built for the next 3 or 4 years on the information they gain from these fish.
Last year we deployed about 2,000 of them. This year we're hoping to get another 1,000 or so. And then in another 3 or 4 years we're hoping to have a usable model that over time will just get better and better the more of these tags that we can deploy.
In Bozeman, CHET LAYMAN, MTN News.
Montana is known for its diverse populations of animals that work together to keep the ecosystems healthy. But what happens if a non-native species is introduced?
So what's happened here is we have in northwestern Montana, they're really interested in finding out about snapping turtle distribution if they're showing up there. Because snapping turtles are they're not native to that portion of the state.
The Montana Fish and Wildlife have set out a notice to report snapping turtles, as the non-native species can cause serious harm.
They have impacts, serious impacts on, especially on waterfowl, ducks and geese and birds like that. Some fish species, other reptiles, amphibians, they can have they're a big predator, 20 pounds sometimes. So
snapping turtles are noted for their rough shells, their long tails, and hooked jaws that can cause quite the painful bite.
If somebody would have a snapping turtle as a pet, you don't want to release those into the wild. Are more aggressive and they'll displace the native turtles here, and they don't survive all that well. So
the most common cause for non-native species making their way to Montana is usually human-caused.
But it's a really good, this is a really good opportunity. People start thinking about this to reinforce that message of not releasing, pets.
So what should you do if you do find a non-native friend while hiking?
If somebody does see one, we definitely would want to know about it. And we have a biologist that deals with those sorts of things, and I'm sure she'd be real interested in that.
In Great Falls, Brianna Juneau, MTN News.
With this week being National Travel and Tourism Week, what better time to promote getting out and about, right? Visit Great Falls Montana Tourism is doing just that, and there is certainly a lot to talk about. If you like to keep your feet firmly planted on the ground when you get out and about, Great Falls is, well, a great place to be.
The first thing we talk about when we visit with people, because they always want to know, is where are the falls? And what is really awesome about the way we're able to introduce where the falls are in Great Falls is connected to the 53 miles of trail along the river's edge, or as the locals call it, the River's Edge Trail.
A popular hiking destination is the Sulphur Spring, a 3.6-mile round-trip hike to the spring, legend has it, cured Sacagawea when she fell ill on her journey with Lewis and Clark. You don't have to limit yourself to the trail, though.
We talk about biking and hiking on the trail, and then we move out into the base camp just a little bit, talking about Sluiceboxes State Park, talking about First Peoples Buffalo Jump, talking about the Rocky Mountain Front and the Bob Marshall Wilderness Complex, talking about the Highwood Mountains.
If you're like me and you also don't mind getting a little wet, there's more than one way to spend some time on the water. My favorite is taking my whitewater kayak to play in the waves at the end of Black Eagle Island.
We talk about the Sun River, the Smith River opportunities, the Missouri River opportunities, and all the recreation that can be done in those areas.
So to recap, no matter how you like to get out and about, Great Falls surely has something for you.
For more information about things to do in and around Great Falls, click on the link in this story on our website. In the meantime, I hope to see you out on the trail. In Great Falls, Colter Ranstad, MTN News.
Insects are a vital part of life and can be both productive and destructive. We'll dig into both sides when we come back.
MTN Outdoors continues after this.
Bugs. We can't live without them. But where some, like bees and butterflies, are very vital to our everyday lives, especially if you like to eat food, other insects are more destructive, specifically when it comes to the health of our forests. I'll let MTN's Tom Buchanan and Tanner Saul explain.
An invasion is killing trees across the country. A small speck seems to be nothing that looks like a killer. But when these little beetles spread to epidemic levels, the results are devastating. There are 600 species of bark beetles in the United States. But as climate change prevails, certain species are expanding their range and growing in the millions, causing an epidemic on trees. One of these species, the mountain pine beetle, has killed nearly 100,000 square miles of trees across western North America over the past 20 years, affecting 18 million hectares of pine forest. The beetles eat a path through the bark and lay their eggs. A single mating pair can reproduce more than 12 million beetles a year. These beetles weren't always bad. Until recently, the beetles played a pivotal role helping balance the ecosystem. Bark beetles broke down older and weak trees, ultimately leading to healthier forests. But as CO2 levels change our climate at a rapid pace, drier conditions and droughts have caused a domino to fall in this precise balance, leaving even healthy trees open to be attacked by their spread. A single domino can't fall without hitting another. Trees break down and rot, creating less habitat for wildlife as it provides little canopy cover or more blowdown. An increase in fallen trees hinders the ability of wildlife movement, increasing the energy they spend when moving throughout their territories. It also affects timber production for houses and buildings, and helps contribute to growing wildfire seasons across the country. This outbreak increases the severity of wildfires, causing firefighters to observe erratic fire behaviors in bark beetle-affected forests. Despite these observations, the U.S. Forest Service says there still isn't a clear understanding of how bark beetle outbreaks affect wildfires. Increased CO2 levels are the catalyst that cause these invasions. But these beetles are also contributing to the carbon dioxide released into our atmosphere. Trees serve as carbon sinks, meaning they absorb more carbon than they release, which in turn lowers the concentration of CO2 from the atmosphere.
According to NASA, 2.6 billion tons of carbon dioxide, 1/3 of the CO2 released by fossil fuels, is absorbed by forests every year.
So not only is climate change a driving factor in the epidemic of these bark beetles, the bark beetles that are killing the trees are releasing tons of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. Restoration efforts emphasizing diversity are considered viable management strategies in this battle. In Missoula, Tanner Saul, MTN News.
The Natural Resources Conservation Service offers a pollinator habitat program in order to promote pollinator growth and to protect our food sources.
What we're doing is creating food sources for our native pollinating animals or insects. You know, I mentioned bats earlier. People don't always think about bats as being pollinators, but they are. Butterflies, insects. A lot of our food, about 1/3 of all the foods that we eat as humans rely on pollination to be produced. And so it's pretty important that we help sustain those populations of insects.
With about 35% of the world's food crops relying on animal pollinators to reproduce, it's no wonder that a federal program by NRCS exists. Heavy losses of bees throughout the nation and Montana's high production of honey are even more reasons to support a pollination station. The program works alongside private landowners to suggest and provide certain native and non-native plants that will integrate well with surrounding areas. The areas in which pollinator-friendly plants are set can vary immensely, For example, some ranchers utilize normally unused spaces in corners of their fields for pollination stations.
Since, the fields are square and pivots are, produce a round circle, they have these open corners that they, typically do nothing with, so they'll plant pollinators in the corners.
Additionally, local conservation districts offer free pollinator seeds for those who would like to help pollinators on their own time.
Reach out to your local conservation district and see if they have a program going on. We have pollinator seed that we've distributed to, well, last year, I think in 2021, it was 80 people in Lewis and Clark County got free seed.
Whether you choose to work alongside the government to support pollinators or DIY it, don't forget to make sure you're planting helpful, non-invasive species of plants. Reporting in Helena, Tom Buchanan, MTN News.
While recreating out here in the mountains, there's a lot of big threats that we have to keep our eyes open for. Bear, moose, mountain lions, just to name a couple. But there's another very, very small threat that we also need to keep our eyes peeled for.
It's a really good time of year for ticks. They start kind of coming out and they're really hungry.
That's right, it's tick season. And if you're out on a hike and one of these little bloodsuckers attaches itself to you for a snack, it could lead to several serious problems.
You might get some irritation in the area either way, of course, because your body realizes that you've been bit by something, much like, again, after a mosquito bite or something like that, you might have some minor irritation. But what you want to watch for, even if you safely removed a tick, is going to be an actual rash developing in the area, and then any onset of fever or chills or fatigue in the next 2 weeks.
Luckily for us, there is no known tick that carries Lyme disease here in the state. But Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Colorado tick fever, and tularemia are possibilities. So watching any tick bite very carefully is important. But the big question is, how do you avoid being on the menu in the first place?
If you find a tick on you, one of the best things to do is grab a pair of forceps. If you have one of those in your medical kit or first aid kit, and grab them, try to grab them. Their mouth parts are barbed, so you want to try to grab as close as you can to the skin and pull that tick out.
If you agitate the tick too much while it's on you, or if you try to twist it and rip it out, what's going to happen is that tick's actually going to regurgitate. And when that tick regurgitates, it's more likely it's going to pass a pathogen or some sort of infection onto you.
The myth that you take a match and kind of burn them from behind, that's not something that you want to do. It doesn't work very well.
And just like when you're protecting yourself against bears, a good spray can help out a lot.
Wear an EPA recommended repellent, and you can put that on your clothes and on your gear as well if you're out hiking, for example. Along with that, it's good practice to tuck your, and it's going to be funny, you can tuck the edge of your pants into your shoes, and what that does is that prevents a tick from getting in contact with your skin by possibly coming up your leg and under your pant.
And now we're moving from ticks to tractors. We'll see how this group of East Helena kids learned about the ranching life when we come back.
MTN Outdoors continues after this. We now return to MTN Outdoors.
Well, you really don't get more outdoors than working on a ranch. And for this group of East Helena kids, they get a chance firsthand to see how our Montana ranchers work with nature to feed us all. I'll throw it back to Tom Buchanan with more.
About 150 East Helena students participated in Ag Day to better understand the inner workings of Montana ranches. Ag Days began in 2017 and was mirrored after Gallatin County's Ag Days. So far, the Prickly Pear Simmental Ranch only serves students from East Helena. The day is meant to give young kids an inside look at what it takes to maintain a ranch. LORETTA Burnham, owner of Prickly Pear Simmental Ranch, says that this day helps to open kids' eyes to the work it takes to put food on the table.
So a lot of times kids just don't understand where their food is coming from. So basically this just gives them a chance to come out here and explore some of these stations. We've got everything from bees and sheep and cattle, and it just tells them where their food comes from, not that you just run into a grocery store and find your food.
Burnham says that she loves doing this to see what kids will find out for the first time.
It's so fun to find out what is their favorite station, what are they learning, and the things that they take away from today, it's stuff that you wouldn't even guess.
For example, 4th grader MCGILLIVRAY learned how cattle and basketball are related.
They have a lot of different parts in their bodies, and most of them are used. And that their skin's made into basketballs and baseballs and baseball gloves. Yeah.
In addition to learning about cattle, students get an inside look into multiple aspects of a ranch, such as beekeeping, horses, sheep, pigs, branding, ATV safety, and more.
Reporting in Helena, Tom Buchanan, MTN News.
Now, I know the name of this show is MTN Outdoors, but for this next story, we're going to head back inside and then down under. And just a small word of warning, Chief Meteorologist Curtis Grevenitz does use a little bit of potty language to debunk this long-standing myth. But trust me, it's all in the name of science.
The Coriolis effect is probably the most scientific excuse humans have for staring into toilet bowls. This effect makes objects on the Earth curve when they should go straight, and it's why some people insist that the throne drains in the opposite direction in the southern hemisphere. If you've taken a plunge down to Australia and given this a try, you've probably been disappointed. Every John has angled jets that pass water into the loo to drive the direction of draining water. The design of the dunny is more powerful than the Coriolis effect in such a small body of water. On Earth, an object that moves along a north-south path will appear to veer to the right in the northern hemisphere, but to the left in the southern hemisphere. There are two reasons for this phenomenon. First, Earth rotates eastward. Second, the relative speed and direction of a point on Earth is a function of latitude. For example, if you were to fire a ball from a cannon northward from a point on the equator, the ball would land to the east of its due north path, and the southern hemisphere would be the opposite. The Coriolis force works on air and water in a similar fashion, but only if the volumes of these fluids are extremely large, like a low pressure or high pressure. In the northern hemisphere, low pressure turns counterclockwise with high pressure rotating clockwise. In the southern hemisphere, lows spin clockwise and highs spin counterclockwise. This story was a straight flush. And now you're a little more weather-wise.
Well, that should about do it for us here this week. If you have any ideas for future episodes or stories you'd like us to cover, feel free to let me know by sending an email to andy.curtis@ktvh.com, and I'll do my best to read them and see what we can do about getting them on the air. But until then, stay safe, and we'll see you back here next week.
MTN, Montana's news leader.